Welcome to another episode of Crash Chords Autographs. I, of course, am Matt, aka Stormageddon. And before we get into this week's guest, as always, I just want to shout out my patrons, Rob, Frankie, Emily, Greg, and Case. Thank you so much for your support. If you too would like to get a shout out at the top of this very show, you can go to patreon.com/Stormageddon and join at any tier, I believe $5 or higher. But any amount at any tier helps. It allows me to keep upgrading and changing and improving the show. Not just this one, but all the stuff that I work on. But also, if money is not a thing that you have spare of, which I totally understand, a rate, a review, a like, a subscribe, and a share also goes a huge, long way for this show. But enough about me and self-promo. Let's talk about this week's guest, which is the incredible Bright Kelly. I met Bright Kelly through the incredible community surrounding Kate Nix. Kate Nix suggested Bright as a ideal guest for the Autographs show. The Autographs show? Whatever, we'll keep it in. She is a two-time guest I would trust with my whole heart for bringing anyone on the show, and so I brought him on, and I was not disappointed. He is a delight. He is an incredible musician, singer-songwriter. He's in a band. He does solo work. He does live concerts on Twitch. It was just a really great conversation about the realities of quarantine and artistry and how they are living together in this really unprecedented time. So without any further ado, or mouth sounds from me, please enjoy the incredible episode I did with Bright Kelly. Awesome. Well, I'm really excited, Bright Kelly, to have you on the show. We run in the mutual circle of the incredible Kate Nix, who is a human delight, ray of sunshine, who I adore. I'm really glad we connected because I've been listening to your music all week, both your band and your solo stuff. And what I love, so often with a lot of solo artists, you'll hear them and their bands tend to be similar. Some break off, but a lot tend to be in similar vein. But what I love about The Great Enough and your solo stuff is it's so divergent. It's so different and both great in such different ways. And that's
not a lot of crossover.
And that's as a music nerd, that's absolutely fascinating to me. Because of course, as someone who listens to a lot of music, I listen to hip hop, I listen to rock, I listen to R&B, I listen to folk. So it's not that foreign for a musician to also be that way. For both your solo stuff and the stuff with the band, are you drawing from similar influences, different influences? It's just translating differently. Like, where are you pulling your inspirations from?
So, the whole, necessity is the mother of invention thing.
Yeah.
That's why there is a solo project on the side, is because of necessity. So I love my band. It is my top priority. It is my main thing. It's my main, income, all of the above. But it is a band with a sound, and we worked really hard to find a sound and define a sound so that when you listen to The Great Enough, if you've heard us once and we come on again, you're probably going to be able to pick us out and go, oh yeah, that's The Great Enough. You're not going to go, is that Royal Blood, or is that Nothing But Thieves, or whatever. Not to knock those. I love both of those bands. It's bad examples, but I think you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, totally.
And so I started working on this project that I codenamed Orphans. And it was because these were songs that had no home in The Great Enough, where it was just so obviously off the beaten path, and then there was no way to course correct it into the sort of bombastic alternative rockosphere that The Great Enough occupies, and so I just started putting these songs together. And the first one I wrote that really became obvious was the recently released How We Live and Die. Mm-hmm. And the minute I wrote that song, I was like, oh, the band's not going to do this. We're not going to know as a four-piece what to do with this. Or if the band does do this, it's going to change too much about it for me. Yeah. And so it became an orphan, and it spawned the idea of the project. And I went to the band and I said, hey, look, don't freak out, but I'm going to do a solo thing. And they were like, yeah, cool.
Nice. Excellent. That's awesome. Yeah. The first time I heard How We Live and Die, I was kind of blown away. I mean, I guess it's safe to assume that you were a fan of rock and roll and rock and that kind of music, just based on your sound. But what I love about How We Live and Die is it has so much power behind it, just mostly being the guy in a guitar kind of feel. But it still like a lot of, I love singer-songwriters and I love the kind of acoustic sound and the like single instrument singer sound. But there's something about the power and the emotion of that and Row that are just unique for that kind of music. I have to imagine the process of writing those songs is an emotional one. It's coming from a deep place.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Row is one of the few songs I've written that is distinctively a story song. So a lot of my songs are pretty tightly connected to my personal experience. And that's an example of a song that's written from a place of fantasy. And I thought that would make it easier to divorce myself from the feeling of it, but it actually made it a lot harder. I sort of fell into the character of this personality of this person who is, you know, like rowing his family to safety so he can turn around and go essentially risk his life, maybe die. And that ended up being a lot harder than like writing songs about the woman I eventually married or writing songs about things that have actually happened to me.
That's interesting. You never know.
How We Live and Die is the same way.
Yeah, it's interesting how you never know with an artist how that's going to go. Like I've interviewed a bunch of musicians, and some people say the lyrics come first, the song come first, personal stuff is easier, stories are easier, and it's always fascinating. Like no human, I think, who writes music writes it the same as another human. There will be similarities, but I feel like it's always such a personal experience. When you're putting these songs together, do you try and attack the lyrics first, create a story, and then put music behind it, or do you go the other way?
So the Bright of last week and the Bright of the week before that write songs different ways even. I don't set rules. I used to set rules for myself on how to do that. And some guys do, you know, you hear these stories about like Rivers Cuomo of Weezer has these binders full of random couplets and rhyming dictionaries and all this stuff. And he like puzzle pieces things together until they make sense for him. Or, you know, you hear about like Brian Eno has like the deck of cards called oblique strategies. And that's how he tricks himself into writing songs. And I can't do any of that. Or sometimes I use tools like that when I feel stuck. But the vast majority of the time, there is a divine spark of an idea, and I chase it down and try to blow oxygen on it before it's gone. And sometimes that idea is a really great turn of phrase, a really good single line. Sometimes it's a song title. I'll just write down things that I think would be great song titles or great album titles.
Yeah.
Like I've never finished it, but I always wanted to write a song or have an album called With What Burning. And I don't know why, but I like that phrase.
That is a nice phrase. I like that as a title.
Never wrote it, but the spark is still like lying around inside. It's actually the chapter title of a novel, chapter in my novel. And eventually the rest of that spark will come, and it might be me sitting playing with a guitar and having an idea, or it might be something that rhymes with it. And I never know. And so it keeps me on my toes. I have to be ready to do whatever the song requires of me.
That's interesting.
I feel like they're a separate entity, and I'm just like, it's like a hunter-gatherer situation. You know, if I don't get there in time, I'm gonna starve, and we're gonna lose the song.
Yeah, no, and like as a creative myself, like coming up with concepts for shows to produce or podcasts to put together, like sometimes I don't have an idea for a very long time, or it takes a co-host to come to me and be like, hey, we should do this thing. And then sometimes in the middle of the night, I'll wake up and go, I have to make this thing. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I've got to make it. And I always find that those kinds of ideas sometimes have more legs just because you can't explain the need. You just know that the need is there, right? And there's something kind of mystifying about that.
Right, exactly. I actually like that you're able to articulate that. It's because it's difficult to explain to people who've never felt like the idea was in charge what that feels like. But often for me, I'm not in charge. I'm at best a conduit, and most of the time I feel like a guy with a butterfly net.
Just kind of like chasing songs down.
Yeah, just trying to catch the idea that before it's gone, and I rarely feel like the master of what's happening. I almost never feel like the master of what's happening. But I like it that way.
Sure. And I mean, you found a way to work within that environment, right? Which is key. My question is, since you work that way, you must not have like a backlog of unused tunes or unused lyrics, or do you have that as well?
I have I have recently tried to count my backlog.
Uh-oh.
I recently, and you know, talking about like lyrics that I've written down on my phone that haven't been set to melody, or guitar parts that haven't been set with lyrics, or ideas and stories that I've had that haven't turned into. And I have a backlog of. I ran out of. I'm sure it's not a total count because it's scattered across 4 notebooks, 2 devices, and of a wide variety of recording apparatuses, apparati, whatever.
Either one, sure.
It's actually, I know for a fact it's apparatuses. I'm just being smarmy. But I stopped counting at like 185.
Jesus.
And
Wow.
and I'm sure there's a few more. And I went, okay, well, that's actually another part of the reason the Orphans Project was happening, is because the Great Enough is a lot more methodical because everything filters through committee. And I started going, well, there's so many things here, and if I only move at the pace that the committee can move, a lot of this stuff is never going to get done.
Right.
And that would be kind of a shame, because as strongly as I feel that the Great Enough's catalog is worthy and interesting and all that stuff, like I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't think that. But I would hate for these little orphan ideas to starve out, to die, because I couldn't find the time or the energy to make something of them. And then the pandemic hit, and it was just like, well, there's literally no excuse. Get in there and do it.
Yeah, same. No, yeah, especially for me, like I started producing more stuff just because I had the time and I could help, like on my podcast network, as I was talking about. What I'm curious about with you, because you, like our friend Kate, have made a business of also performing online, especially now in the pandemic, performing on Twitch like she does, and plenty of other musicians do. Like tons of folks who even before the pandemic weren't. Like I'm good friends with Megaran, who is a nerdcore rapper, and beforehand he was mostly playing video games on Twitch. He was touring live, but now he does DJ sets on Twitch and concerts on Twitch because we can't get out anymore. What's the biggest difference for you from performing at home or in your studio versus the live audience? Like what's the biggest, either positive, negative, just something that's different?
How about both?
Sure, do it.
I can give you both. The freedom is cool. Owning the show, as it were, and sort of donning all the different production hats and learning how to make the overlays and work on transitions and do all these like little sound effect things and stuff to make the show cute and interesting. Those are all things I find value in, things that I find really exceptionally stimulating. And so that's great. And then also the constant need to have a show ready, like I'm doing one tomorrow.
Right.
And the need to have a show ready means I'm constantly thinking of new themes or new hooks to drive interest in the show for myself, actually, more than anybody else. Because if I get bored, it's over. If I don't find it stimulating, it's over. I'm not going to do it.
Right.
And so that's the biggest positive, is that it's a constant kick in the pants. I like that. And then negative, I miss volume.
Sure.
My show of necessity is quiet. It's acoustic instruments. There's no amps and drum set behind me, and there couldn't be, because I'm in a room, not in a concert hall, and I have neighbors, and I'm not a monster. And even if I were in a quiet, soundproofed basement somewhere, I'm one guy.
Yeah.
And while I can play all of those instruments, I cannot do it all at once. For I lack the limbs and or specialized robotic prostheses to allow that. And so, I've had to learn a little live looping and sort of had to improve my skills as a keyboard player and things like that, just because I don't think a show where all I do is play acoustic guitar is interesting enough for me. And if it's not interesting enough for me, why would it be interesting enough for anybody else?
Totally. Yeah, no, I absolutely get that. I think the same way with my podcasts. Like, I want to make, I sometimes get mad at myself that I make shows I want to listen to because I'm editing them all or most of them, so I'm not going to listen to them. Also, I'm recording them, so I'm not going to listen to them. There are only so many hours in the day. But that said, like, the fact that I'm excited that the things I make exist is what I think keeps me making them, right? Because if you're not excited for it, why would anyone else be excited for it?
Yeah, you hear about people who kind of like dive into a thing just to make money or to be successful. And maybe that's a personality trait that I lack, and I'm not knocking it. You know, do your thing. I'm all for whatever somebody finds useful in their own life. But like, you know, I know guys who go down to Nashville and just write really derivative, cheesy, deliberately exploitative country songs, and they make money. They make money doing it. You know, like a friend of mine, he never actually did anything with this. He wrote it as a mental exercise, but he wrote a song that contained this terrible lyric that was like, "My blood is red, my t-shirt's white, and my jeans are blue. And if you feel the same as me, I'll have a drink with you." And that's awful, right? Like that's just cringy and terrible.
Yeah.
And he wrote that as a joke to himself. But then you go and you listen to that specific brand of like Keith Urban-y kind of stadium country, and that stuff's in there all the time because there are guys who have like figured out the formula and just decided they're okay with exploiting that to get the check. And I just I don't have that. I can't do that. I can't make myself do it.
Yeah.
I could write the songs. I know how, but I can't make myself make that my life.
Sure. No, and I get that totally too, because same in the podcast realm. Like there are tons of other interview series. There are tons of other like weekly report series. And like what made me want to do a show like this is that, sure, it's a chat show like other chat shows, but I'm not going to like print out a list of questions. I'm not gonna like give you a pre-interview. It's like I want a casual conversation, especially in the time of pandemic. I feel like talking to people, like I did another interview earlier today with a friend of mine, Jason Redder, who is an actor and a delightful human, and like we're talking and he's like, yeah, before I got on the call I had to remember how to form sentences, how to talk to another person, because we just go so long now without doing that.
Yep. I remember how to talk, but I forget how to behave as if there's another side to the conversation because I'm often talking at the empty camera and then waiting 45 seconds for somebody to respond in the Twitch chat because they're on a delay. And actually that's cool that you interviewed Jason Ritter. I think I'm almost positive I recently watched something that he was in because I was recently on his Wikipedia page trying to figure out who the heck he was, and now I know. So that's pretty funny. That happened yesterday.
Amazing.
Yesterday I went, okay, well, I recognize that name, but I know it's not Josh Ritter. Who is this guy? Jason. And I don't remember what I was watching. I wonder if maybe it was Gotham. I've been watching that a bit recently.
I don't know if he was on Gotham. I can't remember. I mean, his IMDb list is forever long. He's been acting forever. But yeah, no, I think there's this importance, especially now in the time of pandemic, in connecting with people. And like, I was genuinely very excited when you wanted to come on the show because not only, because not only knowing that we have a connection with someone who I treasure, so I know she wouldn't recommend someone who's a douchebag, like, especially at this point in her life. Like, she is done with those kinds of people.
That's so true.
I think she always was, but like, I knew you were good people just by that recommendation. And then so beyond that, then checking out your music and looking at your live stuff, I was like, oh, this is awesome. I'm excited to talk to another human, because I think these kinds of connections they get so much more visceral and so much more important during the pandemic, especially considering the stupidity that we see outside of our social circles and the struggle that we see that other people are purposely causing harm to other humans because they don't want to wear a fucking mask. And it's just,
oh my God, dude.
It's just,
and I'm getting like really snarky about that, by the way. I was telling somebody, like, I have like little catchphrases I reserve for those occasions when I have to go to the grocery store or whatever. And because like my biggest pet peeve, like, obviously I'm more angry at the unabashed I'm not wearing a mask people than anybody else, but I actually have a super strong reaction to what I call the dick noses.
Yes.
The people whose nostrils are hanging out of their mask. And I always look at them and I go, hey man, I don't know if you know this, but like, just from me to you, here's a piece of unique biological trivia. Your nose and your mouth are connected to the same lungs. I don't know if you were aware of that, but if one is showing, they might as well both be showing. Like, this is not helping. And I take so I used to be I was briefly, for a portion of my life, I was on a cane while I was recovering from some surgical stuff. And I still have the cane from when that happened. And I take that with me to the store now because I go, hey, look, this is 6 feet. And I wave it at people.
It drives me bonkers. My spouse is high risk and recently had surgery, and she's great now, but like, we've taken extra precautions, like super overcautious. And like, I'll go to the supermarket in our neighborhood and someone will be walking around with not a mask on right behind me, and like, I'll stop and go, do you mind? 6 feet, please. I don't want to get
Right.
sick. And then they look at me like I'm the asshole. And I'm like, what? Like, what? I don't know how I can be nicer about your stupidity. I'm trying
I
here.
gave up. I gave up on being nice about it. I've decided that if they're going to look at me like I'm the asshole, then I am comfortable being perceived as
It's
the
the
asshole.
asshole. Yeah.
I've just decided it's okay. Like if you can't deal with me insisting that you take basic precautions, that you can, if you can't do like the on your face version of just wearing a damn seatbelt so that people don't stop dying, I don't care if you think I'm an asshole, because I absolutely feel the same way about you.
Yeah.
You
No,
know?
that's a good point. Yeah. This time that we're living in has taught me so much about myself and so much about my neighborhood and the people around me. And it's both heartening when good things happen, but also extremely depressing when most of the other shit is going down.
Yeah.
Has any of that motivated you in your songwriting at all lately? Like, are you finding music in places or finding your own songwriting in places that you didn't before because of everything that's going on?
Yes, absolutely. First off, I'm literally I've literally written 5 songs that I've decided not to keep, and I keep taking the bits of them that feel vital and migrating them into the next edition. But I've been working on the song that's trying to encapsulate how I feel in the pandemic, which is that I'm an introvert by nature, and I don't mind being home alone. I actually don't go out unless I have a show or my friends are bugging me about it, even when we're not under a lockdown. And so it's not uncommon for me to spend a lot of time on my own, and I'm very comfortable like that. In contrast to my wife, who likes to take walks and be on the phone with her relatives and say hi to the neighbors and pet people's dogs and all that stuff. So it's a little harder for her than it is for me. But after a while, the sort of touch hunger does start to lay in, because I'm an introvert, but my circle of friends is, if anything, closer because of that.
Yeah.
Because a lot of us are a little introverted, and so we don't all have huge numbers of friends and huge numbers of social things to go and do. You know what I mean? It's just this like under 10 hardcore family of us most of the time. In fact, in my case, it's mostly a group of 4 or 5 people who are just like sitcom level in each other's business.
Yeah.
And I miss being able to throw my arms around them, and I miss being able to, like, a good friend of mine, we used to work out together 3 times a week, and we used to game together on play tabletop RPGs together
Sure.
on Sundays. And now we see each other on a video call on Sundays to run the game, and that is it. And even just today, he messaged me and he was like, "I miss you, dude." And I'm like, "Yeah." So I'm finding that the world is both kinder and crueler than I initially perceived it to be. The pandemic has revealed that my understanding of the spectrum of human emotions was limited. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
now the analogy is, now I can see in infrared as well. You know what I mean? Now I can see UV as or thermal vision. I've got predator vision.
I was just gonna say, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, it's just there's all these new behaviors, and you're seeing the best and the worst of people. I have snoozed or unfriended a lot of people over the last few months.
Same.
That prior to the pandemic I thought were excellent people.
Same.
But as soon as I see you like arguing about whether or not to send kids back to school right now, and I just go, oh, there's no argument that kids should go back to school right now. That argument doesn't exist.
Yeah.
You could argue that it's hard on parents if they don't. You could argue that the burden and the hardship of children not being able to go back to school is incredibly hard on parents and on children. And I agree with all of that. But at no point to me does the solution become send the kids back to school. The solution is always various stages of fix this part of that problem. Like, okay, well, we can't expect parents to oversee the homeschooling. Great. Throw money at that problem.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like just anything before. And at this point, I know I'm right, because Georgia just reported that a 2nd grade class has tested positive for coronavirus. 2nd graders, dude. 2nd graders. We've already established that human adults cannot be responsible. But sure, let's try it with 2nd graders.
Yeah, it's insane how life has changed with all of this, and I find I cling to friendships more, and newer friendships I explore faster because I want to know more good people, since I'm hemorrhaging people that I thought were stand up or good people or intelligent people, and it's shocking. Also, like, talking about the physical touch thing, like, I'm a hugger. I've always been a hugger. It's just the kind of person I am. But that said, I'm also a person who doesn't always get along with his parents. They have never did anything wrong. They were great to me. I sometimes my parents drive me crazy, like all parents do. But like, going to see them, we had a social distance gathering. It was my brother, my sister-in-law, their kids who are teenagers, and my parents. And like, being in the same space 6 feet apart from my parents and not being able to hug them crushed me. And like, even my nephew and niece, who could care less about anything at this point. They're at that age where, like, if I'm talking to my nephew about video games, I'm the coolest uncle on the planet, and then anything else, it doesn't matter. And with my niece, if it's not musical theater and it's not my spouse specifically, she doesn't care either. She's done. She's like, I could be doing anything else. But that said, still, like, getting the reluctant hugs from them, like, I missed it. And like, there's this. Like, I'm very blessed that I have a loving spouse who I get to spend a ton of time with, more time than we ever spent before. And we love each other very much, and we can hug and hold each other. But it's not the same as, like, the familial or the friend embrace or contact.
No, it's not.
And I'm hitting that. But that said, going out and seeing my family, even though we couldn't hug, it did re-energize me in a way that I didn't expect, because we were at least in the same damn physical space, 6 feet apart, wearing masks. And, it was better than nothing.
Yeah. We recently did a social distance, like, safe in the park with the masks on gathering with some friends, and it was healing in a lot of ways. And it's funny, man, I'm not a hugger by nature, but all of my friends are. And so I actually spent years being mildly uncomfortable with the level of touching my friends enjoyed, and being like the guy. Like, I normalized my friends shaking hands by grabbing forearms instead of hands, because hand-to-hand contact made me a little weird. And literally all of my friends, I guess not to this day, but to the beginning of the pandemic, that's how we shook hands, like Hercules.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
legendary journeys. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I like that you got the reference.
Oh yeah.
Well, I had good feeling about your ability to get pop culture references when I realized that your Discord name was a Doctor Who reference.
So. It is. Yeah, it's not only my professional DJ name, but I was named because I started in the burlesque scene with a friend around the time that episode aired. And he
the Dark Lord of all.
And so that he just started calling me Stormageddon, and it just stuck. And it was Nasty Canasta who really drove it home. And like, when Nasty Canasta gives you a nickname, it sticks. That's it. It's yours forever. And so I leaned into it. I have a limit. I miss the days when Kevin Sorbo wasn't publicly a douchebag, but beyond that, I love Xena, Hercules.
Well, you're allowed to love Xena. That show remains both relevant and feminist.
Yes, absolutely it does, and it's amazing.
Lucy Lawless remains awesome. She never did anything to horribly disappoint us. She never went down the Kevin Sorbo road, or I'm trying to think of other examples, because most of the time when it's a celebrity who comes out and turns out to be like a Trump supporting bigot of some stripe or another, it's always somebody where I'm like, yeah, obviously, like Kid Rock, that didn't surprise anybody, right?
No, not at all.
But every now and again you're like, the other example is Chris Pratt. That was a bummer.
Yeah.
When Chris Pratt turned out to be a conservative knob, I'm like, really Chris Pratt?
Yeah.
That's the church you support? That one? Come on.
But the fun part is the opposite. Chris Evans really is Captain America, and I am so happy about that. I love that
he like stopped cursing because of that role. He took it so seriously. He was like, I guess I can never curse again.
It's so good. It's so brilliant.
He's perfection. I love that guy.
But yeah, no, it's tough in this time. Also it's kill your idols, right? Like, it's so much harder, especially, like, I don't want to say it's hard being a white dude, because it's not at all. Like, that's not true.
No, it's not.
But it's hard having heroes who are white dudes now, because most of them suck. And I'm not someone who will mince words about it either. If you turn out to be a sexist, racist,
right. Like, bye Ryan Adams. That discography mattered. That his collection of music was everything to me.
Yeah.
And when Mandy Moore and the rest of those girls came out and said what they said, I went, okay, fuck him.
Yep.
just completely. I guess I'm never gonna cover when the stars go blue again.
Yeah,
That's just life. Because I'm not one of those guys who can separate the art from the artist to
Same.
any major degree. You know what I mean? Like, it's one thing if you're like a mildly controversial artist who sticks your foot in your mouth or whatever. You know what I mean? Like a John Mayer sticking his foot in his mouth in the 2000s or whatever. I can roll with that stuff. But like, when I was a kid, one of my favorite book series was the series called The Belgariad, right? And it was by this dude named David Eddings. And I was like, oh, what a great like high fantasy romp this was, and how connected I felt to these characters. And then a few years ago, I found out that he was arrested and did a year in jail in the 70s because he adopted a foster child and then locked him in a dog cage in the basement for weeks at a time. And him and his wife separately both served a year in prison for abuse of a kid. And I went, okay, well, dead to me.
Yeah.
Dead to me. And if it ever came out that I was some horrible, horrible creep, I would expect my fans to do the same thing to me. End me, cancel me, game over. There are things that can be forgiven and there are things that cannot. And it's not even like I'm a Mr. Cancel culture guy. Like, not to run off on a tangent. This is actually a thing I'm really passionate about and a thing that I think is important. I am not actually a proponent of cancel culture. I don't believe that one mistake or one bad deed should erase a person's career. I think everyone should be given an opportunity to respond to what they did, to explain why they did what they did, and to explain what they're going to do next to make restitution. But I think that it is really, really rare for someone to say something in the wake of an accusation that doesn't make things worse, and that doesn't dig a hole. And of course, in the case of Ryan Adams, it was not one bad thing; it was many bad things over many, many years. It wasn't Cosby, but it was repeat. It was serial behavior.
Yeah,
I can't think of an example off the top of my head where somebody did something bad and then made a good apology. I don't know. You could say there's gray area about like Aziz Ansari,
right,
or whatever. But for the most part, like I'm a huge proponent of restorative justice over retributive justice.
Yeah.
But that does not mean that we make allowances for people who actively continue to do bad things, and especially because it is 95% of the time turning out to be guys who look just like us.
Yep, absolutely.
And it does, like, woe is us. This is our horrible burden to bear. Oh no, oh no. It seems like the lot of the quote unquote like good white guy these days is to be doing as much as we can to make up for what people who look like us are doing, or try to put goodness into the world, or be a megaphone for people who don't look like us or whatever.
Yeah.
But if the worst thing that I have to deal with as a white guy is the fact that a lot of other white guys are awful, I'm still experiencing a great deal of privilege in my life.
Yeah, for sure. And like, I am honest about my privilege constantly. Like, I am a bisexual male, but I'm in a straight presenting relationship. I am Jewish, but for all intents and purposes, I'm white. I pass, and so even with and so of course I'm scared with all the anti-Semitism in the country and all of that stuff, but I still have so much more privilege just at a first glance than most of my friends. And
kudos to you for being able to casually talk about intersectionality that way. Because that's important. It's important to know, like, so many people think that the white privilege has something to do with you having like money or good things in your life. And I'm like, dude, I slept in a trash bag full of other people's clothes until I was like 8 years old. I'm a child abuse survivor. I'm a sexual abuse survivor. I'm a survivor of a great number of violent incidences. There's a huge scar that other people won't be able to see, but you can see this scar on my head right here, where a bunch of guys beat the snot out of me with a hammer when I was 16 years old. I grew up in a really, really, really bad neighborhood. I went to really, really, really dangerous schools. I had a huge amount of privilege because, all other things being equal, if nothing else about my life had changed, but I was also black, it would have been a lot harder for me.
Yeah.
And that's white privilege. Like, I went through all the things that I went through, but when I wrote a college essay about it, the college admissions person thought that my story was very inspiring.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, of
Would that
course.
have happened? Would that have happened if my name was Jamal? I don't think so.
No, definitely not. No, you're absolutely right. And it's like and it's impossible. Like there's so many like escapism is important right now, and I will
Yeah.
never fault
Yeah.
someone for that. But just the same, we can't ignore it, and we do have to engage with it when we can. And I think that especially in the arts or with a podcast or with a Twitch stream, you have to like. I know so many people are like, well, I'm not going to talk about it. It's not my place. It's like there are ways to do it, and there are ways to lift the voices or lend your audience to those voices. And I think
Yeah.
it's more important now than ever. There's performative support for this, and I never want to do that. But I always want to be sincere in the ability to lift up those who need it or help in any way that I
Yeah.
can and use my privilege for good, as it were.
Yeah.
And I
it
think
is your place. It's everybody's place now.
yeah. And so I have to imagine as a songwriter and a performer who's performing regularly online, it is impossible to do what you do without engaging in this stuff, whether it comes up in chat or whether you're writing music, or I imagine that all of this affects the work you're doing now.
It absolutely does. My audience already knows that I'm a politically outspoken person. I am. If there is an epitome of Kate Nix's social justice bard T-shirt,
It's you.
it's me. It's me, and it's Kate. That shirt exists because Kate and I needed to be wearing it. Because I to your point, I think it's everybody's place now. It's not enough to be it's not enough to be non-racist. You have to be anti-racist.
Yeah.
It's not enough to be non-sexist. You have to be anti-sexist, and you have to be actively those things.
Yep.
Because at this point, I think fence straddling is pretty directly supporting the people who are hurting others.
Yeah.
And since most of that vitriol is not heading for me, because again, to your privilege, I am also what you would call a stealth member of the LGBT community,
Right.
because I am in a monogamous relationship with a woman, and I have been in many monogamous relationships with women in my life, and all things to the contrary have been either very low key or very not public.
Right.
And until recently, I hadn't publicly, I guess, queered myself is probably the term. That's the term that my friend Joe used. And I did that on an episode of my show. I specifically did that on the Pride Month episode of my show because I went, well, I've been benefiting from this privilege for a very long time, and sure, there's only 70 people who are gonna see this live in real time or whatever it's going to be. 70, 75 people were, I think, watching on that show. But I came out sort of on the show right before doing a song because my privilege was shielding me, and I think it's more important that it be shielding other people. And so there's a lot of political talk on my show. We actually end most of the shows with me playing a song called "Stay the Fuck Home."
Excellent. I love it.
And we talk about it really openly. And anybody who can't get down with that doesn't stay in my community for long.
Yep. Yeah. No, I'm the same way when I stream games now. Like I have one of my prompts, my auto bot prompts, whatever they're called. I'm a professional, I swear. But one of my auto prompts is about the Black Lives Matter movement, and it has a link to like a ton of resources in case you have no idea where to start. I want that in my feed. I want my viewers to see that so they can approach it if they've not thought about it. And I've not had anyone react poorly to it yet, but I imagine at some point I will. And if I do, I will have my mod confront them and remove them if necessary. Like
Yeah.
I
have.
I'm sure. Yeah. I have to imagine that it has come up before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got in trouble live at a show, actually. And it was subtle, and I felt bad, because I don't dehumanize the opposition as I see them, but because I do see people who still support Donald Trump as my opposition. I do. Like, if you voted for him in 2016 and you have remorse about it, that's different than if you're still supporting him now. But I even humanize people who are still supporting him now because I think it is always the result of either ignorance or cruelty, and cruelty can also often be a kind of ignorance. You know what I mean? So I don't run from a dialogue with anybody who disagrees with me politically. I try to have an open conversation with people. I try to convert. I try to I try to Will McAvoy from Newsroom, you know, I try to get on a mission to civilize. And it doesn't always go well. In fact, it often doesn't go well, particularly when you're dealing with people on the internet who feel emboldened to say whatever they want to say. But I was at a show where we opened for the Wallflowers, and we were asked to take a photo with this group of guys, and they were super nice and super supportive, and they couldn't say enough great things about our music, and they had just bought some merch, and they were a riding club, a motorcycle riding club, not an outlaw club, but like just a bunch of guys with motorcycles who enjoyed them. And when we were getting ready to take the picture, I stopped the camera guy and asked everybody to turn around and take it from the other direction, because they had a Thin Blue Line flag on their display, and I didn't want to be in a photograph with it.
Right.
They weren't wearing MAGA hats, or they didn't have anything on their persons. And the Thin Blue Line is a particularly interesting example, because I think up until the George Floyd protests, a great number of people didn't see what was wrong with that, and couldn't see what was wrong with that, because, you know, if you went up to a person a year ago and just said, hey, you'd support like the rights of cops, right? And, you know, it's a leading question, and you'd want to go, well, yeah, I mean, of course I do. Why wouldn't I? And not realizing that the Thin Blue Line has all these racist implications,
right,
or that so much of it is about cops protecting cops from consequences when they do bad things, blah, blah, blah. And you think about it as just being like, you know, if you walked up to somebody and you were like, well, look, you wouldn't want somebody to go and start shooting up this group of people, right? No, of course I wouldn't. And so the Thin Blue Line is like really extra divisive in a way that even the MAGA hat is not.
Right.
And I caught some flack for asking for it to be out of the photo from their table organizer. And I was like, look, I'm sorry, but at the end of the day, my convictions are my convictions, and they're not conditional on being easy on you.
Yeah. And good on you to do that.
Yeah, well, you have to. And because people ask that all the time too. How many times have you been in the conversation where somebody said something? Because I have addressed this on the show a number of times, where somebody would say something like, how would you feel if it was your brother, your daughter, your whatever, talking about, you know, protests against cops or whatever. And I always have like a really strong adverse reaction to that, because why should that change the answer?
Yeah, it shouldn't matter.
Right. Your convictions should not be conditional based on how convenient they are.
Yeah.
You know, the right thing to do should be the right thing to do, whether it's the easy way or the hard way. And you should be endeavoring in your life to do the right thing, no matter how easy or difficult it turns out to be.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And I think it's hard to reconcile with that stuff, but it's still important to do it. And I think, like, you know, tons of...
And I haven't always.
Yeah, of course. Me neither. Like, I learned a lot in the last year that I probably should have learned a lot sooner. But, you know, I'm learning, and I'm actively trying, and I'm still learning. I'm still making mistakes. But the difference is I'm actively trying to do better, learn, and move in a direction where, you know, basic human rights should exist that don't exist right now.
Sure. And it's like, you know, if I got wildly famous tomorrow, if like my song was chosen as a theme song to the next James Bond movie or whatever.
Nice.
And I needed to like hire an assistant to go through my social media and delete everything embarrassing, there'd be plenty to do for that person. You know, like just to out myself right now, just in case this ever comes up in the future, I'll just out it right here on your podcast, man. I actually used to be one of those guys who wanted to have the discussion about the Irish slave narrative. I used to be that guy. And of course now that's cringy to me. And I go, oh my God, no, what were you thinking? And I want to punch 22-year-old me in the face for feeling it. But I actively did that. And I used to be the guy, and now this guy makes me cringe too, but I used to regularly be the guy who'd say, all right, but just to play devil's advocate.
Oh no.
Right.
No.
But you didn't know. Yeah. You know what I mean? Certainly 10 years ago, I didn't know.
Yeah.
When I was in college at the peak of my Dunning-Kruger years, thinking I knew everything.
Right.
And now, you know, now having grown and learned that I'm a dumbass like everyone else.
Yeah.
I'm an educated dumbass, and I'm a dumbass with a really good memory and an ability to process information quickly, but none of that makes me not a dumbass.
Correct.
So, having been the guy who used to do those things and who used to derail conversations about slavery by discussing the fact that my family emigrated here after the Civil War and therefore I wasn't culpable for it doesn't matter,
It
dude.
doesn't
I
matter.
benefited from the institution,
Yeah.
and I didn't know that stuff then. And it took, of course, friends of color to correct me and
Yeah.
teach me, and then the big epiphany. And tell me if this is true for you, because I asked a lot of people this. Have you lived in a relatively urban environment in your life?
Yes.
Have you been an active voter most of your life?
Yes.
Okay. What percentage of times that you have voted has your voting booth or polling place or the person who accepted or gave you your ballot been a black woman? Is it in thinking about it, is it a high percentage?
No, probably not.
Okay. For me, it's almost 95%.
Oh, wow.
I started paying attention to it over the years, and I realized, and then I started looking into it, and I realized that, pound for pound, I think black women are the most politically motivated and politically active demographic in America, which is why they were able to save the world from the ravagings of would-be Senator Roy Moore a couple of years ago. So, like, for me, people of color are saving the world from itself and saving me from myself for years now.
Yeah, no, totally. And I should make it very clear that we are two very white men having this conversation, and that we only have a tiny percentage of we have the whole world's horse in this race, but like a personal experience, tiny. I feel like it's always important to call that. Yeah.
I'm a white dude with red hair. I am super white, noble. And it's funny because I'm actually not, but it doesn't matter because I'm super white passing.
Yeah.
My great grandmother was Native Hawaiian.
Wow.
And so, full on, like, we know her name, her history, the whole shebang. Her name was Malia Kabakani Lehua, and she emigrated here from Hawaii. And I still have relatives on the island who you would stand them next to me and you'd be like, well, clearly you guys are not related because I look super Celtic.
Yes.
And I'm aware of that. And therefore it doesn't matter. I have, like Elizabeth Warren, I have enough genetic material that I could have put Pacific Islander on my college applications, but I didn't because I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm really not. I'm white.
Yeah.
Like, call it. You could dress it up a million different ways, but when your skin is white and your hair is red and you get people telling you look like insert white celebrity here your whole life. In my case, it's been a lot of Chris Pratt and Val Kilmer. You're white.
Yeah.
And just accept, like in your case, you're Jewish, but you're white.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I've gotten a lot of Trent Reznor, actually, when I was younger.
I can see that.
Thanks. I mean, there are worse people to be called, although I'm nowhere near as jacked as he got in his later years. I don't understand how that happened, but it's phenomenal. Good for him. He's like a tiny tank now. But anyway.
Ask me about that on a completely different podcast. I'm a personal trainer.
Oh, excellent. We just got a Ring Fit for our Switch, and I'm actually very excited about it because we can work out at home. It's something. Like, I'm a gamer, so gamifying anything will get me to do it before anything else, probably. But
I'm thinking about buying that plank thing. But yeah, shift gears.
Yeah, let's go back to music, that thing that people might actually be tuning in for. So I have some suspicions of where your vocal influences might come from, but who are some of your favorite singers over the years and who you think you're emulating or where you drawn inspiration from?
Oh man, I totally want to hear yours first.
Well, so specifically on what we were talking about before, on How We Live and Die, is it weird that I heard Bruce Springsteen in there?
No, a lot of people keep saying that. And it's funny because I did not hear that when I did it.
Sure.
But you're not the first person to say that preoccupied with how we live and die.
Yeah.
That made them think Springsteen. And I love that. First off, I love Springsteen. And really interestingly, that was not true probably 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. As a kid, I could not stand his music. As a teenager, could not stand him. As a young adult, could not stand his music. And in college, a friend of mine in college who would later go on to become my girlfriend and then my wife. But when I met her in college, we used to take all these car rides, and she would play a lot of Bruce Springsteen stuff. And I'd only heard, like Glory days and
the big ones.
The radio shit. I didn't realize there was this incredible wealth of music that was much more experimental. And so Springsteen is an influence, but not necessarily a conscious one. But I think when you have a raspy voice, comparisons to him are inevitable, because I can't really get rid of all of that. I can clean my voice up to some degree. Like I used to do musical theater and sort of classical singing, and I can still get clean enough to carry those. But I can only take it so far. At the end of the day, I have a raspy voice.
Sure. For
me, big influences. Adam Duritz of the Counting Crows was a big seminal influence as a child.
Sure.
I used to think the raspy voice was going to be a liability. I thought it was going to be a problem until I heard Brian Fallon of the Gaslight Anthem sing.
Yeah. You're like, you could do that?
Yeah. He became a huge influence on me, which actually led back to Bruce Springsteen, because he's a big Bruce Springsteen fan.
Sure.
And then outside of that, man, it's almost all soul singers. I am constantly trying not to consciously imitate anybody. I'm not trying to I'm trying to find my own voice at all times, but there's a lot of Otis Redding.
Sure.
In my training, there's a lot of Sam Cooke in my training. There's a lot of Wilson Pickett in my training, because all those guys had that kind of like that ability to just really, really, really grit it up.
Yeah.
And finding that I had that ability, those were the guys who taught me how to use it. And then a bunch of my biggest influences are actually female singer-songwriters, who I don't sound like at all,
right?
But who inform my phrasing. Like I'm a massive adherent of Ingrid Michaelson. I'm a massive adherent of Regina Spektor.
Sure, of course.
I'm a massive adherent, actually, and people think this is funny, but Sarah McLachlan.
Sure.
I just think, putting away the song that made everybody sad about dogs.
Yeah.
She's got a really interesting diction.
Yeah,
she's got a really interesting phrasing. She's got a lot of looseness in the way she pronounces things. And you certainly can't mistake her for anyone else when she's singing. And then Taylor Goldsmith from Dawes.
Nice.
That'd be the last one.
Yeah. And
I'm sure there's a million more, but those are all big ones.
For sure. And like, I think at the end of the day, we are our influences, whether we realize it or not. I listen to a huge variety of music and genres, but my favorite artist growing up was Queen. And yes, and now A Hill I Will Die On is Freddie Mercury is the greatest singer to ever have lived. No one sings like him. Period.
He is the single greatest frontman in rock history, and I will back you to that until that is the hill I will die on with you. I agree. I don't cite him as an influence because our voices are so wildly different, but I could sing the Queen discography to you for a quarter right now.
Yeah, exactly. I see this as the beginning of a beautiful, beautiful friendship, right, Kelly?
I think so.
But that said, like, now going back and listening to all of their old stuff, all the way through their discography, I'm like, oh, there are elements of hip hop in here. There are elements of R&B and rock and punk, and like, same with the Beatles. Like, the first time after I was a big punk, going back and listening to Helter Skelter, I was like, oh, this wasn't punk because punk didn't really exist yet in the way it does now. But it was definitely punk. It's definitely a punk song. It is a punk song. And that kind of broke my brain. It was actually when Rock Band Beatles came out, and I was playing a lot of their discography, and I am not a musician on any level other than I can identify really cool music. Beyond that, I am useless. But playing Rock Band, like, I would listen to so many more layers of that stuff that I just didn't notice before. And when we played Helter Skelter and I'm trying to strum along, I'm like, oh shit, this is a punk song. What the hell? Where did this come from?
I'm such a massive Beatles fan. Like, so I think the Beatles are not overrated. That's how much I like the Beatles.
Same.
Because they're widely considered the greatest band in the history of music and the most influential band in the history of music. And I think that reputation is 1000% deserved. Yes. And if anything, I think they don't get enough credit. That's how big a Beatles fan I am. I like them. I like them so much, and I've dug so deep into learning their sounds. Even though I don't think that's an audible influence in my music in a lot of ways, except maybe my style as a bass player, because I play like Paul McCartney with a pick and muted. But I actually have literally bought preamps for my recording studio, specifically designed to get the guitar tone from Revolution.
Oh, that's awesome. That's brilliant.
Because Paul and George like practically invented heavy distorted guitar. Helter Skelter is like the closest thing to a metal guitar tone for another like 15, 20 years after that song actually existed. You know what I mean? Without them, no Deep Purple.
Yeah, totally. I'm a diehard Beatles fan too, but now to see how in sync we are, I will tell you my favorite Beatle, and then you will tell me yours.
Sure, go for it.
Mine is George Harrison.
Mine is George Harrison.
Excellent. We're destined to be best friends. That's it. Once the pandemic's over, we're just going to hang out. It's got to happen. There's something about... So I bought the collector's edition of Beatles Rock Band that came with the George Harrison plastic controller because I needed... there's something about his songs that speak to me on a level, and his music that speaks to me on a level. Like, my favorite song by him ever is not even a Beatles song, and it's such a cheesy song, but it's I Got My Mind Set on You. Because
great song.
It's just such... It slaps so hard, even now.
And it's a masterclass in pop songwriting. It is a masterclass.
It's just astonishing to me. Like I forgot about it for a long time, but I remembered the music video from when I was a kid, both of them, because there are two different versions. And I recently, I think, let's say within the last 5 years, went back and listened to that song again and that album again, and I was like, oh my God. Like, it was like I'd never heard it before almost. It was astonishing.
My favorite is probably What Is Life from All Things Must Pass.
That's a good one too.
I just think that song also just slaps so damn hard. Like that is eternally like the bop. And I think no Beatle had a post Beatles career that came close.
I would agree.
You know,
totally.
John Lennon did some great stuff. Paul McCartney did a couple of cool things. Not so like Paul. I think Paul really kind of blew his load with the Beatles in a lot of ways.
Yep.
I think his best work is with the Beatles. I think John's best work is Venn Diagram. I think some of it's with the Beatles and some of it's not. And then I think George had this just incredible post-Beatles solo career. I think All Things Must Pass is the greatest, like, out of the ashes of a band album in the history of music. It's just this front to back. You can't stop listening to it.
No. And I like, as a true Beatles fan, you didn't mention Ringo at all.
I like Ringo.
I do too. No, he gets a bad rap.
Ringo was the perfect drummer for that band.
Correct.
He was the right guy for them.
Yeah, totally.
You know, and there are things he contributed to drumming that are like unique. Like there's a way of playing the hi-hat that other drummers will recognize as the Ringo way. Because a lot of guys, the stick goes up and down on the hi-hat. And Ringo, watch old videos. Ringo like does this side to side movement. Yeah. It's referred to as washing the windows, and it makes the hi-hat, instead of going, it goes like a little bit. It just makes it like loosen up a little bit.
Amazing.
And you know, like that's Dave Grohl.
Yeah,
does that because of Ringo. It's great.
Talk about a musician who influenced me, and I'm not even a musician, but Dave Grohl is probably one of my all-time favorite musicians because, like, I loved Nirvana, but then his post-career with Foo Fighters and then them Crooked Vultures and literally everything he's done on the production end. Like, there's something about him. And also, he's a genuinely decent dude who is sometimes like a superhero, like played a show with a broken ankle on a throne, high up on drugs. Like, this guy is what I wish... Not that all rock stars were, but he's like what I think of when I think of a modern rock star. I don't think of some drugged out, blissed out, fuck up. Like, I think of...
That's what you want.
Yeah, like you want Dave Grohl.
And I don't think there are a lot of guys who have his stature.
No.
He's a huge influence. Actually, the Foo Fighters in general are a big influence on The Great Enough. And I think that kind of does come through a little bit because all of us are big fans of the Foo Fighters. And it's funny because as much as Nirvana was really essential to my development as a musician, if I could only listen to one of those bands for the rest of time, it would not be. Now, okay, what's your favorite Foo Fighters song?
That's tough. I mean, like, it's classic to go back to the shapes and the colors, and there's something about My Hero that resonates in a way.
Sure.
But I don't know. It's really so hard. I mean, also All My Life, there's something that gets me fired up about All My Life that no other song does. Like I just love that guitar riff. Like I could listen to that guitar riff forever. So that's probably one of my.
I'm a toss up. It's either Walk, which is my favorite to cover.
Yeah,
I just love to cover that one. I do a piano only version of that one on the show once in a while.
Lovely.
And it's between that and a pretty deep cut off of Sonic Highways called God Is My Witness.
Oh, God Is My Witness is such a good song. That Sonic Highways is so
song.
Underrated. Yeah.
It's a Queen song.
It is. It absolutely is.
Like, that is completely a Queen song to me. And my holy trinity is Queen, David Bowie, Prince. Like, there
you go.
That's the three best.
That's the correct answer. That's the correct answer. I don't care what anyone else says. That's the correct answer.
I literally have tattoos for them.
That's amazing.
On my arm.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but they're not actually influences on the way I sing. They're influences on the way I write and the way I perform, because my voice doesn't lend itself to doing maybe Prince. I'd say there's probably some Prince in my singing style.
Right.
But Bowie, I sound nothing like him. There's not a whole lot from his technique book that works for my voice.
Right.
And Freddie, same thing. What I take from them is theatricality, and in the case of Freddie, Freddie has the greatest breath control in music. Like,
absolutely,
he could just hold a note for a million years.
Yeah.
And I did learn that he has great posture on stage. You can always see his stomach is really, really tight and drawn in, and he's always really active in his body. And he does this opera thing. Now check this out. Watch old videos. For a guy who moves as much as he did, and I do the same thing because of him, there's an opera thing called Park and Bark, and it's a technique. So the opera technique Park and Bark is when you're getting toward a really high note or a really long note or something that's really difficult for your body. If you've been moving before that, you plant your back foot, you tighten in your diaphragm, you relax the rest of your body, and you just go. And it puts all of the tension in the right places. And Freddie Mercury does it a lot on stage, and he just moves so much in between that you can't tell, and it's amazing.
Yeah, no, for sure. If you watched him do "We Are the Champions" or "Bohemian Rhapsody" live, like in those old videos, like he's absolutely doing that. And like, it's my favorite thing. So to show you before we wrap up, the kind of nerd I am. When I first got my driver's license, the first thing I had to do was get 4 of my other friends, and drive and headbang to Bohemian Rhapsody. Like, I made my friends do it, and most of them wanted to, but like, I was like, I have a car. And also, this is something my parents, if they ever listen, probably never want to hear, that when I first started driving at 17, I was headbanging and not looking at the road. But that said, I had to do it.
Do Zoomers know about that?
I don't know.
Does Gen Z know about that?
I don't
Gen
know.
Z, if you ever listen to this podcast, please tell me that you know about headbanging to Bohemian Rhapsody.
Please.
And if you don't, please go watch Wayne's World.
Please. A movie I watched recently, I was a guest on a podcast called Let's Rewatch, where they talk about a movie they haven't seen in a while, then pause the podcast, go watch it, and then come back and talk about how it held up or didn't.
Recommend me to that. I would love that.
I will send it to you. And my episode was on Wayne's World. I picked it out of a few different, and I was so afraid that Wayne's World wasn't going to hold up, because a lot of comedies hasn't from the 80s and 90s. But Wayne's World, except for a few small moments, is so pitch perfect comedy and still holds up so well. It was insane to me. Like, I laughed out loud so hard at that movie. And
the opposite of rewatching Ace Ventura.
Oh, and it
doesn't hold up.
No, it doesn't. The Mask doesn't hold up either. A lot of Jim Carrey stuff doesn't, and that's a bummer, because I love Jim Carrey.
Liar Liar kind of holds up.
Yeah, that's a good one. But all that said, Bright Kelly, this has been a pleasure. I feel like we could talk for another 4 hours, but neither of us has the time. But
that's true. I actually have another call in like a few minutes.
Excellent. Then we will wrap it up. Thank you so much for taking the time. This was a delight. I hope to catch your live streams in the future. You can come back anytime. And I literally have 3 other podcasts that love having guests, so I'll have to have you back on those.
Please do. I'm a huge nerd. I'm all about coming on to talk about, video games or tabletop or movies or pop culture. I'm all about it.
I literally have a video game podcast that talks about the variety of gaming, and I do have a pop culture TV and movie podcast. So we'll get you in.
That's the next one. Let's talk about that one in the future.
We will. But that said, before you go, I want you to tell everyone where they can find your music and where they can find you on the internet, because I want them to check out your stuff.
I appreciate that. All right. The part where I plug. Okay, so my band is called The Great Enough. You can search The Great Enough on the streaming service of your choosing or go to thegreatenough.com. We are active on Spotify and Instagram primarily, but we are on everything. My solo material, everything is at www.brightkelly.me. That's spelled just like it sounds, BRIGHTKELLY.me. And that has links to carry you through to literally everything, no matter what you want. And of course, I encourage you to find me on Twitch or social media at BrightKelly19. 19 being the best number.
It is the best number. I agree. Absolutely. This has been eye-opening and incredible. I'm so glad that we became friends, because I'm saying we're friends now. That's it. It's done.
We're friends.
We're friends now.
Yeah.
The last thing I'll have you do is we have a saying on this podcast that's born out of my now retired music review show. And it's the idea that if you're creating art of any kind, no matter what's going on in the world, life isn't that bad. You can move on because you're making art. And so distilled, the phrase is, music is life and life is good. So if you could sign off the show by saying that phrase, we will wrap it up.
Music is life, and life is good.
That's it for this episode of Crash Chords Autographs. Our theme music is by Michael Kill. Our logo was designed by Case Aiken and Joey Amons. If you liked the show, please rate and review us on iTunes and Facebook. You'll help us reach more listeners. Questions, comments, or guest recommendations? Email matt.storm@crashchords.com or hit us up on Twitter at CrashChordsWeb. Thanks for listening.
Hi, this is Victor Devon, and I am the host of We Burlesque, the podcast. Every Monday, I talk to fabulous denizens of nightlife, including burlesque performers, both seasoned and new to the form, drag performers, performance artists, DJs, and artists who make up their respective scenes. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and more. Please visit WeBurlesque.com to check out episode recaps and see all the formats available. And remember that music is life. Life is good.
Bananarama?
Okay, all right.
A band?
Yeah.
Yes. As a pastor's kid growing up in the 90s, there was a lot of mainstream entertainment that I was sheltered from.
Stephen Root, he does one of the voices.
Okay.
You know him from News Radio.
Do I?
You know him from Office Space.
Do I?
You know...
Most things, really. So, now that I am an independent and out queer 30-something, I'm finally asking my friends to teach me about all the stuff I missed out on. Wait, Raffi did Beatles covers?
Yes, he did.
My mind is blown.
He did Octopus's Garden. And,
Yeah, I remember Octopus's Garden.
No.
I didn't know that wasn't a Raffi original until just now. The Re-Education of Hazel Tarts. Subscribe now.
Kevin Costner. He was so foxy.
I know the name, I don't know the face. I cannot... What is Kevin Costner? Can you just show me a picture of Kevin Costner's face, please?
Think of the guy,
This is hurting my
not
head.
Cheech Marin, but think of the other guy in Tin Cup.
I've never seen that.